Happy Wednesday, everybody. It is Wisdom
Red leather,
Wednesday.
yellow leather. Red leather,
Yeah,
yellow leather.
there we go. It's Wisdom Wednesday here on Growing Your Mindset. Our time in the gym. We're so excited to have you with us this morning. Adam is going to be bringing to us a subject, amend the soil. So I'm kind of, or was that amend? No, it was amend.
Amend the soil. Yes, yes. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are going to be talking about some wise things today. So, Wisdom Wednesday is my favorite day of the week. And today, this has been, I highly doubt that this is unique to me, like my own original thought or anything. But this was a thing that occurred to me over, I guess, the course of my life, I guess within the last several years, this idea of amending the soil. And I wanted to kind of take some time and develop this idea because when I talk to people about it, they're like, where can I get that book from? And I'm like, no, it's just something I came up with, or, it was just my own observations and things.
Yeah.
And so, not to say that this isn't in a unique, point and idea to me, because we're going to be talking about where it comes from and those things. But I do want to, first off, tell everybody good morning. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Thank you guys so much for being intentional for your own lives. And, we're all doing these things because we want better for our lives. We want to be able to enjoy the time that we have here in this world. And we want to be able to improve other people's lives and enjoy it with them too. And so thank you so much, all you beautiful, amazing people that are ready to get rocking and rolling in our time working out in the gym. So
Let's go.
let's
Yeah.
go. So this idea came from, so give you a little background about me. Brian knows this. We go back since high school, but this was, I guess, my high school years. I was in horticulture, and ever since then, I had a love for plants and growing things, even though I probably killed way more things than I've actually grown. But this idea of horticulture, this idea always appealed to me. And I think we can learn so much just by looking at nature around us. And so, good morning, Jason. Good morning, everybody. And I think that this idea of amending the soil is a really cool idea because, like, if you take a plant, okay, you take a tree and you're looking at the tree and you see it's looking a little sickly, right? It's looking a little yellow. And you're like, okay, this is not looking healthy at all. And so, what do we do? Like, how do we get this tree back in good health? Well, you can't do anything to those leaves, right? You can't paint the leaves, you can't pull them off, or nothing. You can't do anything to the leaves themselves. But what you have to do is get to the root, right? You have to get to the root of the plant. That when the nutrients come from the root, they go into the plant, they go into the leaves, and it changes it that way. But we have to take one more step back, right? Because how do we get to the root? Well, we have to amend the soil. And so when we prepare the soil, when we give it the proper nutrients that the tree needs based on whatever the deficiency is, it gets in there through this roundabout process. And this is so much of how life is, that so many times we are always attacking the superficial symptoms of a problem and not getting to the root of the issue. And when I think of this idea of painting this picture of mending the soil, changing the color of these leaves, like getting it back healthy, and we can apply those things to our lives in so many different aspects.
Yeah, no, and it's a powerful concept. I mean, obviously, we see this in medicine too, right? I mean, when I say we see this in medicine, we see the opposite of it in our country, right? There was a time in our country when medicine was actually about solving problems, but now it's kind of like taking your car to Midas. They don't actually fix the car; they just swap out parts. Now it's like they just give you, here, try this drug or this drug. Here, we're going to go after this symptom or that symptom. The root, who cares about the root? Let's solve these symptom problems.
Yeah, and then you have more symptoms because of those symptoms from the drug. So you have to have another drug to counteract, the side effects from the initial one. And we can see it really obvious in those kind of things, right? If you are having headaches every single day and all you're doing to solve that problem is taking aspirin, like it may solve the problem right now, but what happens the next day, the next day, the next day? And instead of doing that, what if we take a step back and see why we're having these headaches to begin with? Actually, I haven't been sleeping well. I'm dehydrated. I'm not eating right. So I start doing those things, and guess what? I don't have to take the aspirin anymore. Like there's no more headaches, right? And so when we're looking at it this way, we can see like the benefit, right? And there we can apply this to so many parts of our lives.
Yeah, if we cut to the root, rather than worrying about, fixing the symptoms, then we actually have a chance of solving the problem. It's been interesting to watch because Yutong has been on somewhat of a journey into her culture, um, and the Chinese culture, and so she's been studying Chinese medicine and acupuncture and stuff like that, and that's the whole philosophy. And it's such a refreshing difference is that they're entirely concerned with how do we get to the root problem and how do we actually cure disease rather than how do we just maintain. And it's interesting because back in my 30s, I think I was about 30. Oh man, maybe 31, 32. I mean, early 30s. Yutong and I were early in our marriage. And I went to the doctor. I was working for a note holder, um, who, or I was the note holder working for a guy who was tuning pipe organs. It's one of those weird jobs you only get when you're in seminary. But anyway, so I'm in school and I have this job, and we're eating fast food every day. And so I go for a checkup. They say, "Oh, we want to run a cholesterol test on you." They run the test, and they're like, "Okay, you got to take this drug for the rest of your life, or you're going to die
Hmm.
in your 40s." Well, we figured that the high cholesterol was probably because of the diet at the time. And it was a summer job, so sure enough, once I stopped eating the fast food, the stuff changed, and I never went on the lifetime drug. But that's a pretty scary concept. That
Yeah.
when you mess up something in the United States, the medical system here is going to say, okay, take this, and then we're not going to try to cure it. We're going to try to give you this drug that you take for the rest of your life to sort of balance things out.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not, I mean, you think about a rubber band, you keep stretching it, keep stretching it, keep stretching it, keep stretching it. It's not going to get more stretchy. It's going to get less stretchy over
For
time.
sure. I
Yeah.
love this idea of addressing the cure and like actually trying to see what the root is so we can cure things. And I think the natural progression from that is like, how can we prevent it altogether? And so, like, this is this idea of this holistic approach of our lives. So many times we compartmentalize everything and we don't see how interconnected they are. If we're having problems with our relationships at home, it's going to affect our work. It's going to affect, how our outlook on life. It's going to affect these things. And so, like, when we can see, okay, what is my overarching goal? What is my, whatever it is, those big picture, big goal things, and what are my values? And if I'm like looking at those things and I'm trying to address those things, a lot of times the symptoms, the distractions, I like to call them, these things will just kind of take care of themselves. And I love this idea of like looking at the root, like looking at the cure, because so many times we just try to band-aid things.
Oh yeah, of course. So let's take and move this over into mindset and start getting into some specific
Okay.
examples.
So where I started developing this idea was with my kids. And I was reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I'm sure we talk about that book many times in here. But for those who are familiar with it, it's one of the earlier chapters. I think it's the chapter on paradigm. And so it's before he gets into the actual meat of the book. And so he's talking about this idea of paradigm. And if you're not familiar with what a paradigm is, it's just basically the way we frame our world, right? The way we see our reality and the way we, our perspective. And so he was talking about his son and how his son was like not really good at baseball, and he was weak and he wasn't able to hit. He wasn't doing very good. They weren't very showing very much confidence in him, and they decided to reframe how they're looking at this, and they completely approached it in a different way, a more holistic way, where they're looking at him differently and looking at him like he is capable. Look at all these other things that he's able to do. And because they reframed the way they're looking at their son, he in turn started developing these skills that they were wanting, desiring for him to have.
Yeah, you know what? That was a very powerful story for me as well. I mean, that impacted me a lot in the way that I deal with my children because, it reminded me of that base reality, right?
Yeah,
If you expect a certain outcome from people, you expect your boss to yell at you when you go into work. You expect your coworker to steal from you if you leave something valuable on your desk. Yeah, you're going to find that it may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but someday it's going to happen. On the stealing one, maybe nobody stole it, you just misplaced it, but you've got this perception in your mind, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and so you begin to attract that to you.
yeah,
And it's like with your kids, if you think that they're no good for anything, they're just not using their full intention potential, you're just overly critical, and you're looking at all the negatives. You're basically placing them in the gap
yeah.
and instead of the gain, and they're going to act accordingly, or at least that's what you're going to see.
That's
There may
it.
be all kinds of brilliant stuff going on, all kinds of amazing growth taking place, but you're so focused on them not reaching these goals that you have for them, that you're not seeing all the good. And once I changed my perspective looking at my kids as well, it was amazing to see that, wow, you know what, I was casting them, as a
Yeah.
casting director of my mind, I was casting them in the wrong role. I needed to just back up and let them be who they are. And
Right. Totally. And I think when we're looking at this, it just brings to mind of how this affected me and my journey with my oldest daughter, and subsequently all the rest of them, as I'm developing these skills, from Stephen Covey, these ideas of helping our children with their own mindset as well while I'm developing mine. And my oldest, like, we would just look at her like she was just irresponsible and lazy, and like she was always just trying to get out of work, and always trying to get her siblings to do her work for her, bribing them, paying them, and it would just aggravate us. And we hated that she played a victim all the time. She always got defensive. And so this old paradigm was like really keeping her in this place. Like she was showing this. She was showing this in everything. And like you said, there may have been brilliance, and there was, but we weren't looking at it, and all we were looking at was from this one perspective. And then when I started like looking at it from this idea, like, okay, how do I get her to not be this way, to do all the other things that the opposite of all these things, and how do I get her to do it on a consistent basis? And this, whereas when I started developing this idea of like, okay, well, what's the root, why is she being like this? And so I figured out, well, I kind of formulated in my own mind, it may be wrong, but this idea, she's in school all the time, she's getting told what to do, this and that, and she comes home, she feels like she needs to relax and wind down because she's been working all day. And so like when I start putting myself in her shoes, and she has no control of anything, and then she comes home and I'm like barking at her to do stuff like, why are you being so irresponsible, and this and that. And so she's getting it from school, she's getting it from me. And so when I switched that, and I was able to say, okay, well, if what's the root? Like, let me give her some more autonomy. Like, let me give her some responsibility, like her own choices of things. And so I started handling it differently, and she started picking up the responsibility. Like when I stopped, just nitpicking her or nagging her about things, she would actually do it on her own. And like seeing this transformation, it's a slow process sometimes, to get leaves that are about to fall off dying, to turn them back nice and healthy and green. It's a long process, but it has to start with that observation and that awareness of what's happening. And then we can start like taking a holistic approach to whatever the problem is and solving it.
yeah, one, and I mean, we can't expect a perfect 180 in these sorts of things, because some of those things that we observed are probably true. My oldest son, my perspective now is to try to not push him into the gap,
Yeah.
and try to stay in the gain with him as much as possible. And that's been super helpful. He still does boneheaded things. He's still, he's still a teenager. So I mean, that hasn't changed, but um, at least now he doesn't have the extra added pressure of trying to live up to some standard that I've created for him.
Yeah.
And he's starting to really blossom where he's planted. And some of the other things, the whole parents don't understand thing, that's probably actually a little bit true. I mean, as much as I didn't want to admit it, yeah, I thought it when I was a kid. They think it as kids now, but I really thought that they were going to have a horrible time, because they're a little bit more into video games and stuff like that. And when I was a kid, that those kids were called nerds. Um, but so I was worried that they'd, maybe get picked on, not fit in, that sort of thing. But no, they're peers. They've got a strong peer group. They're fitting in just fine. And in fact, Joshua, the oldest, he's decided that he's going to get rock hard. So he's working out every day. And my goodness, he's doing it. I'm pretty proud of him. So.
Awesome. Awesome. And when we're looking at this idea of other people, a lot of times it's easier to see those things in other people. Like, yeah, I can definitely point out all the things that I don't like about my kids. I can start rattling off those lists real fast. But a lot of times there's things inside of us internally that we want to change. And a lot of times those things, we will focus on the superficial, the symptoms, and we get distracted by those things and we don't go any deeper than that, whether this is with somebody else or ourselves. And I think that we need to make sure when we're looking at this idea, looking at this concept of what is the root. And for me, I realized in my life, for my personality and what the things that I wanted to do, that communication was like one of those overarching things that I needed to really truly focus on and understand. And this idea of empathetic listening and communication. And I feel like when I started building that skill set, like everything in my life started changing. It was that kind of impactful thing. I feel like the gap and the gain are like, this concept is one of those very, very impactful things that when we can apply it, start putting it into the soil, it starts getting into the roots, getting into the system, and everything starts flourishing and thriving.
Yeah, put a bow on that for me just a little bit. Try the analogies in just a little clearer for me.
Yeah, sure. So like, when we are when we're living in the gap, right? We're in the gap. There's all these things that we have that we want that we don't have. We have the perspectives that are all like they're not there, right? And we see that. And so this is essentially when we're looking at that tree, it's dehydrated, it's yellow, the leaves are falling off of it. It's not healthy. It's not where it wants to be. So what do? We start adding gratitude, right? We
Mhm.
start measuring our things, all the stuff. We start tilling up the soil, we start putting it in, we start mulching it, right? And so when we're doing these things, this is starts making an effect in our lives, right? It starts changing things and it starts making those leaves green again. So here Jason's saying, what about kids that don't know what they want or feel? How do we get to the root? Excellent question. I think this is like one of the questions of parents of all times, right? Like, how do we figure out what's going on in our kids' mind? And and I think that you know this is we could have a whole entire subject on this, but I think it is this, right? How do we get to the root? Well, we got to put ourselves kind of in their shoes. Like, what is going on with them, and how do they feel in their lives, and why do you think the things? Because a lot of times, we will look at our kids in a certain way, right? And we'll see them in a certain way, and I think a lot of it starts with that, how we see them. If we're looking at them saying, I'm never going to get through to them, there's always this disconnect. These are the kind of vibes that we're telling ourselves, and that's the kind of thing that's going to happen, rather than like, I know that I'm making progress. I know that I'm building up my emotional intelligence and communication skills, and this is going to help them. And like, all of this starts this chain reaction. So I think a big part of it is just being intentional. I tell my wife all the time that we're not going to mess up our kids. She's so afraid that we're going to say something or do something that's going to cause them to be ruined or resent us and hate us for life. And I say, as long as we're being humble and as long as we're being intentional, like it's all going to work out. It's all going to work out well. And I think these are some of those amendments, like some of the soil amendments that we need to be using: humility, intentionality, and just using that empathy.
Yeah, I love that. So basically, what you've given us is a framework with humility, intentionality, gratitude, empathetic listening, and basically with that recipe there, also coming with a new perspective, allowing them to get out of the gap that we've created for them, and just be basically allow them to grow, allow them to figure it out. The fact is I love the way that Jason put it too, where he said want slash feel or feel. The idea there is they probably don't know themselves, and that's the thing, is that we can put so much pressure on them to fit something that we've created in our minds. When we do that subconsciously, we don't realize we're putting that much pressure on them. I never did
Yeah,
until I got intentional with
yeah, yeah,
with trying to listen to what they're saying, and they're not always saying, "Dad, I know exactly what I want to be, and I know exactly what I want to do." No, they're, "Dad, I can't do anything with the amount of pressure you're putting on me."
yeah. Yeah, and Jason just asked to dive a little deeper into intentionality. And for
Mm.
me, my approach with my kids, and my relationships is, hey, like awareness first off. Like there is a thing called emotional intelligence, and why we wig out and we blow up on each other is because we don't have that much emotional intelligence, right? And so we're not dealing with those things in the right way. And for me, I started off with my kids saying, hey, like I want to be a better father. Like I'm learning these skills and these techniques that's going to make me a better dad. You guys want me to be a better dad? And everyone's like, yay, of course, right? And so that started it. And now I'm being held accountable. And now I'm saying, hey, what I'm doing here is very intentional. Like I don't, I want to make sure that I prepare you for life. Like all the things that I'm doing is not just because I'm reacting to what they're doing, right? And so we can do this with our own lives. A lot of times we just react. We are just headache, take the aspirin, right? And this is just reacting instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, what's going on here? And so for those non-communicators out there, they're not actually non-communicators, right? They just don't know how to articulate those things, or maybe they can't do it in the environment that we're putting them in. Because a lot of times, like if we are in, like just recently, Jason went to a retreat. Okay, Jason went to this retreat and he got a lot out of it. And we talked about this a lot when we did the podcast, when he came on with us. But in that environment, he was able to like let all the defenses down and just really, be present and like really get the most out of it, right? But a lot of times we don't give our kids an environment where they can actually talk. We're like, oh, you can tell us anything, but can they really? Are they really feeling that? And I think when there's lots of things, right? But it's a slow process. And so I want to give us some tips, like, because this is one of them. The main one that we have to realize with people, you can't rush people, right? And one thing that I always remember Brian would say as kids: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And this is how we have to be. We have to be in it for the long term, because with people we have to be effective. We can't be efficient. With things we can be efficient. And so a lot of times that effectiveness with people is a long-term process.
Yeah, yeah, and I really love that statement, non-communicator, because that actually speaks a lot, right? Because a non-communicator, it doesn't exist. Yeah, obviously, I don't know the situation, so I'm not, but normally that means that we haven't been empathetic enough. We're not listening in the way that they're communicating, meaning they're not communicating with words; they're communicating some way else.
Yeah.
And empathy is seeing that and sort of being able to intuit intuitively, um, um, sort of get that there's something wrong. Obviously, if they don't communicate with words, we can't know exactly what's going on. But silence at times where doesn't seem to fit the situation, that's communicating something.
Mhm. Yeah,
Speaking or crying or outbursting in a time when it's not fitting, there's
those
not a
flags.
catalyst for that event, that's
Mhm.
communicating something. And so
Yeah.
um,
Y
to listen to those cues as well as to the verbal is going to be
yeah.
it's going to be important, and learning to interpret those visible cues, it's a little bit harder, right?
Sure, sure. And I think that a lot of times one of the other things that we can do is be the change, like model those behaviors that you want to see. And so even if your kids aren't talking to you, you talk to them. Like you tell them how you feel. And in this kind of way, we're modeling those behaviors. Because when like I'm for with my kids, I'm very quick to apologize. Like I will apologize. Hey, I'm sorry, I lost it. I shouldn't have done this, and this is why I did that, and I should have done this instead, and I do this all the time. And so eventually, if this is the actual way to do it, where you're amending the soil, you're being the change, like you're doing these things, eventually when my kids do something that's wrong, they're going to want to write it, and they're going to apologize to their siblings instead of react and get mad, and there's a fight going on and they get defensive. And I think that a lot of times when we just be that change, that is a huge step in the right direction.
Right, and I mean, and that's another super, super important thing to point out is that kids are learning by observation from not just you, but every person around them. The TV shows that they watch. I mean, if they watch Nickelodeon all day, they're learning. Okay, kids talk to their parents this way. Kids talk to their peers this way. If they're watching, and I just picked a random channel. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to, you know, I've not watched a single Nickelodeon show, so I'm not criticizing anything. I have no idea how the kids act on those shows. I just
Right,
there's
right.
a lot of slime. Um, but what I'm saying is that they're learning from observation. So it may be one of those things where maybe they, not to pick out Jason, but maybe if I'm experiencing silence with my kids, they're just not talking, or they're being passive aggressive, or maybe they're modeling a reflection of the way that I interact with my wife, or how they've seen me interact with others, or how they've seen my wife interact with me, or that sort of thing. And so being
Yeah.
able to, I mean, obviously, we're we've got to work through the ways that we are. I mean, I've I've been that person who goes through those seasons of being passive aggressive and not being my best self.
Mhm.
And I love that approach that you take, where you apologize quickly,
Yeah.
and that humility, because it speaks volumes. It tells your children, hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm trying my best. I want to be the best version of me, and I can't imagine that would do anything but inspire them to as well want to be the best version of them.
Yeah, because what happens if you screw up? Like, you're still winning, right? Because you're like, "Hey, I just totally blew that." And you're teaching them humility, you're teaching them like, "Hey, you don't always get it right. This is what this is part of the process." And so, like, I feel like these things are a holistic approach, and we can do this for every aspect of our lives. We're talking about here like relationship aspects, but we can do it in improving all kinds of things in our lives, whether it's those skill sets that we want to improve on, like so that we can that's why we invest in ourselves. Like that's why we do mentorships. Like this is amending the soil so we can focus on improving. That's why we're in the gym right now, right? This is that putting those nutrients into the soil, and it's going to produce an effect.
Let's go. Let's go. So, Adam, this is more your topic, and I'm loving this topic. And I think maybe this is one of those areas where we're going to need to collab and put together a book and get it out there for people, because it is important, and a lot of people, I mean, and it applies to so much more than just raising children. This would work. This idea and this concept of changing our focus, amending the soil, it's going to really help with every single relationship
Sure.
that we have.
And like I said, it's nothing new, but looking at things from different perspectives, looking at things like just saying it differently, different terminology, different pictures. It sometimes things are connected that weren't connected there before. And so, this, like Stephen Covey talks about, and I think we can end at this before we do our affirmations, but he says, as far as the long-term game, you can't pull up the flowers to see how the roots are coming along.
Very good. All right, let's go. Let's
go.
get into these affirmations. Crunchy, creamy, chewy.
I'm leading today, right? Leading
Yes, sir.
leading the charge. Here we go. Because I am committed to my growth.
You know what, Adam? I am committed to my growth.
That's it. I am loved, appreciated, blessed, and highly favored.
I am loved, appreciated, blessed, and highly favored.
Challenges are opportunities for me to improve.
Challenges are opportunities for me to improve.
Every day, I'm getting better and better.
Every day, I'm getting better and better.
I am my best investment.
I am my best investment.
Life happens for me. Everything is for my growth and benefit.
Life happens for me. Everything is for my growth and benefit.
I am an action taker.
I am an action taker.
I am committed to being the most positive person that I know.
I am committed to being the most positive person that I know.
I am a fixer. I am somebody's answer. When you get me, you get everything that I'm connected to.
I'm a fixer. I'm somebody's answer. When you get me, you get everything that I'm connected to.
Justin, I am healthy, wealthy, and wise.
I am healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Let's go.
All right, you guys, have an amazing Wednesday. We'll be back here tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, for our time in the gym. We look forward to having you guys with us tomorrow. What are we talking about tomorrow, brother? I haven't hit you with that one.
I know. I should have been expecting it here. So tomorrow we are talking about, we're going throwback to Stephen Covey tomorrow.
I love it.
Yes. Ode to Stephen Covey. Yes.
Ode to Stephen Covey. Well, honestly, he's been so influential, and that book, 7 Habits. I mean, that was the first one for me on the journey, or the first one that was super impactful. Him and Jim Quick. So gonna have a lot of good stuff for you guys tomorrow. And I think without any further ado, man, just thank you guys all for showing up and hanging out with us. This was amazing. James, Jason, Kimberly, Pansy, Deborah. I don't know if I saw Angie today, but Angie and
Brian, yes, all
Jason,
y'all.
Brian, man. It's just, we feel loved, appreciated, blessed, and highly favored. So we'll see you guys mañana.
Tomorrow.